You know the feeling, right? It starts with something tiny, a weird sound from your car, maybe an email from your boss that just feels a little off. And then, boom, 10 minutes later, you're not just worried, you are mentally planning for a full-blown personal catastrophe. If that sounds familiar, then you already know the power of an anxiety spiral. But here's the thing. What if that mental storm isn't you losing it? What if it's actually a predictable biological process? Well, that's what we're going to do here. We're going to deconstruct that storm, piece by piece, and show you exactly why one little worry can explode into 100, and more importantly, how to cut the wire before that spiral even gets a chance to take off.
Okay, this right here, this is the central paradox. It's the key that unlocks this whole thing. See, we all think that if we just think hard enough, we can solve the worry, right? We can just rationalize it away. But the science, it shows the exact opposite is true. That very act of intense, focused worrying, that's the fuel for the fire. Your logical mind has literally been hijacked by a 200,000-year-old alarm system, and it's using your own intelligence against you. So this isn't some kind of personal failure. It's a biological feedback loop. And to break it, we first have to understand how it's even built.
All right, so let's put on our neuroscientist hats for a minute and actually map this process out. An anxiety spiral. It's not just random chaos happening in your head, it's a circuit. It's a series of predictable stages that feed into one another, and each one makes the last one bigger and louder. Understanding this anatomy, well, that's the first real step toward gaining control. Because let's face it, you can't stop a process until you can see it clearly.
I mean, it's an incredibly frustrating experience, isn't it? You think to yourself, okay, if I just figure out a plan for this one bad thing, I'll feel calm. But the second you solve for X, your brain immediately hits you with Y and Z. This is that core conflict in action. You're using your prefrontal cortex, that's your sophisticated, logical, planning part of the brain, to try and negotiate with your amygdala, which is basically the brain's ancient primitive fear center. And here's the problem. The amygdala doesn't speak logic. It doesn't care about evidence or statistics. It only understands one thing: attention. So by focusing on the threat, you're basically shouting at your amygdala that the danger is real, it's right here, and it needs to sound more alarms right now.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sequence of events. We all tend to think that a scary thought causes a scared feeling, but so often it's actually the other way around. Your amygdala first sends out a jolt of anxiety, a physical sensation, and your brain, feeling this alarm going off in the body, scrambles to find a reason why. It's thinking, I feel scared, so there must be something to be scared of. And that's when it starts this process called narrative recruitment. It starts acting like this frantic lawyer, pulling files from every past failure, imagining every worst-case future scenario, anything to build a compelling story that justifies that initial physical feeling.
And this is the trap. This is where we get stuck. All this constant thinking and story building floods your body with stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. That's what creates that sick, sinking feeling in your stomach and that mental fog where you just can't think straight. Your brain goes into a state we can call, well, let's call it cognitive redlining. It's so busy scanning for danger that it literally disconnects from the nuanced, reasonable parts of itself. Everything becomes black and white. It's either completely safe or it's fatal. A tiny mistake at work suddenly feels like a career-ending disaster because, in this state, your brain has lost all sense of proportion. You're completely stuck in a loop where your attempt to solve the problem is the very thing making it 1,000 times worse. So the crucial point to get is this. It's not just a string of bad thoughts. It's a circuit. Each piece of the spiral triggers the next, which amplifies the next, creating this runaway reaction. In fact, I've got the perfect metaphor for how this works. Yeah, this nails it. Think about it. A microphone isn't supposed to create noise, right? It's supposed to just transmit sound. But when it gets too close to its own speaker, the signal loops back on itself, growing and growing and growing until you get that piercing, deafening screech. Your brain is doing the exact same thing. A thought creates a feeling, you notice the feeling, which creates more thoughts, which creates even stronger feelings. It's literally a biological feedback scream happening inside your own head. Okay, so let's trace the exact path of this storm, step by step. Stage 1, it all starts with the seed thought. A simple, what if, pops into your mind. Then, stage 2, the affective flash. Instantly, your amygdala sounds the alarm, and you feel that physical jolt, the stomach drop, the chest tightening. Stage 3 is narrative recruitment. Because your body feels danger, your conscious mind starts writing a story to match it. My stomach just dropped. Oh, it must be because that project is completely doomed. Then we hit stage 4, PFC disconnection. As that alarm gets louder, your logical prefrontal cortex basically goes offline. You lose the ability to say, hey, maybe this is an overreaction. Every single anxious thought now feels like a hard fact. And finally, stage 5, somatic amplification.
You become aware of your own physical symptoms. Whoa, my heart is racing. And that observation acts as brand new evidence that you feed right back to the amygdala, starting the entire loop all over again, only this time with way more intense.
So listening to all this, you're probably thinking, this sounds like a terribly flawed design, right? I mean, why would evolution create a system that can so easily torture itself? Well, the answer is, from a purely survival-based perspective, this isn't a flaw at all. It's a feature. Your brain doesn't think worrying is a problem. It thinks it's a brilliant survival strategy.
And this brings us to a core evolutionary principle: threat simulation primacy. Look, for our ancestors living out on the savannah, the ability to worry, to simulate threats in their minds, was an incredible advantage. Picture two early humans. One of them spends the night peacefully sleeping. The other one stays up all night catastrophizing, thinking, what if the fence is too low? What if the predators come from the north? Which one do you think gets eaten by wolves, and which one survives to pass on their genes? Exactly. Your brain is descended from a long, unbroken line of champion warriors. It is fundamentally wired to believe that being prepared is infinitely more important than being peaceful.
And right there, that's the fundamental mismatch of modern life. Your brain's ancient, hardwired priority is preparedness over peace, but your conscious goal, it's peace over preparedness. You are literally at odds with your own operating system. And what's wild is that when you worry, your brain actually gets a tiny hit of dopamine. Why? Because it feels like you're doing something about the problem. Your brain interprets worrying as productive work. It creates this false sense of agency, tricking you into believing that by just spinning in circles, you are somehow controlling the future. So the crucial thing to realize is that you are running a 200,000-year-old operating system in a modern world. This is what we call evolutionary lag. Your brain treats a modern abstract stressor, like a missed deadline or an awkward conversation, with the exact same neurological intensity as a lurking predator in the bushes. It's only got one alarm, and that alarm is always set to maximum. Back in the wild, turning the volume down on your anxiety probably meant you were dinner. Today, that high volume is just burning you out.
Okay, so if we know the spiral is the feedback loop, and we know our brain is actually biased to encourage it, how on earth do we stop it? Well, this is where we pivot from just explaining to actually applying. The absolute key is to stop trying to reason with the storm. You cannot win an argument with a hurricane. Instead, the goal is to interrupt the circuit. We need to cut the power.
And lucky for us, there are two main ways to do this. We can go bottom up, which means starting with the body to calm the mind, or we can go top down, starting with the mind to change our perspective on what the body is feeling. Let's look at a few really powerful tools for each approach. All right, first up, a bottom-up tool, somatic grounding. Look, when your mind is spinning out of control, trying to talk to it is pointless. So don't. Talk to your body instead. Things like splashing ice-cold water on your face, holding an ice cube, even doing 10 fast jumping jacks, they create a kind of physical shock. This sudden, intense sensory input forces your amygdala to snap its attention back to the immediate physical present. It completely bypasses all those looping thoughts and talks directly to your primitive brain through something called the vagus nerve. It's basically a circuit breaker for that initial anxiety flash.
Now for a top-down tool. This one is so simple it might sound like it won't work, but it is profoundly effective. It's called third-person labeling, and it's all about making a subtle but powerful shift in your internal language. That little shift is designed to create just enough mental space to reactivate the logical, observing part of your brain, the part that gets completely shut down during a spiral.
So let's look at the difference here. When you're inside the storm, you say, "I'm anxious." That's a statement of identity. You have merged with the feeling, you are the storm. But watch what happens when you shift your language to observing the storm. The brain is generating a high arousal narrative. Something incredible happens with that little change. You are no longer the storm. You're the observer of the storm. You're simply describing a biological process that is happening inside of you. And that act alone re-engages your prefrontal cortex and creates this tiny pocket of calm where you can start to regain control.
Okay, another powerful top-down tool is something called cognitive decoupling. This is all about fighting the brain's tendency to make the anxious story your entire reality. And you do it with one simple word, and. You acknowledge the scary thought without validating it as the absolute truth, and you connect to your immediate physical reality. For example, I am having the thought that I will fail this presentation, and I am feeling the texture of my chair. See what that does? That simple act prevents the anxious story from having a total monopoly on your attention. It grounds you right here in the present moment, reminding your brain that the story is just that, a story. It's not the whole of reality.
All right, so let's bring all of this together. All these tools, all these insights, they all point toward one final, really powerful way to reframe your entire relationship with your own mind. If you take away just one thing, let it be this. The anxiety, the spiral, the catastrophic thoughts, that is not the core of who you are. It's a biological program. It's ancient survival software that is simply running too hot. The moment you can see it as a process that is happening to you, rather than something that is you, you get your power back. You move from being a victim of the storm to being the technician who can learn how to cool the system down.
And you know, this changes our entire goal. The objective isn't to live a life where there are no storms. Come on, that's impossible. The goal is to get so good at observing the storm that you can find the eye, that place of calm, clear-headed observation right in the middle of all the chaos. From there, you can watch the winds blow without being swept away by them.
When it comes right down to it, it's this simple. You can't stop the initial spark, that first what-if thought, but you can choose not to pour gasoline on it. You can choose to stop the frantic solving and analyzing that we now know is the primary fuel for the entire spiral. So this is the strategy to take with you. Fighting a thought just gives it more energy. It tells your brain, hey, this is important, this is dangerous. The real power comes from gently but firmly changing the channel. Use one of the body-based tools, label the process that's happening, and then redirect your attention to the physical world around you. You're not trying to suppress the thought, you're just revoking its access to the microphone. And when you do that, you silence the feedback loop, and you allow the storm to pass.